A poor girl cared for the cold CEO in ICU. Her routine uncovered the nurse forging fatal medication. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's return to our main character. Lily Parker stood just inside the glass doors of the intensive care unit as the night shift settled into its familiar hush, the kind of quiet that wasn't silence at all, but a steady rhythm of soft beeps, measured breaths, and distant footsteps moving like shadows. She was 24, broke, and carrying a canvas tote that held everything she needed for 12 hours of work and most of her life besides. And yet when she looked through the window at the man in the bed, she felt the same strange calm she always did, like the room itself asked her to slow down. Ethan Caldwell lay motionless beneath the lights, a man the city knew as a brilliant, distant CEO who built companies with surgical precision, now reduced to stillness and wires and numbers on a screen. Lily wasn't a doctor or a registered nurse. She was an aide, the kind people rarely remembered by name, assigned the late hours because she never complained and because, quietly, she paid attention. She checked the clock, 9:40 p.m., and began the routine she followed every night. The routine that kept her steady when rent was due and her mother's pharmacy receipts stacked up at home. She washed her hands until they were warm, adjusted the blinds to cut the glare, and spoke to him the way she always did, not loudly, not softly, just enough to be human. She told him what day it was, how the city had cooled to the low 50s, how the rain earlier smelled like clean pavement, how the cafeteria coffee was still terrible but dependable. She lifted a warm cloth and wiped his hands, counting under her breath the way her grandmother once taught her, then smoothed the sheet at his shoulders and aligned the pillow so his neck rested straight. The monitor answered with a steady cadence, and Lily smiled, because consistency meant safety. She noted the medication times on her small pocket card, double-checking against the chart mounted at the foot of the bed, and paused, just a heartbeat longer than usual, when she noticed the ink color on one entry didn't match the others. It was probably nothing, she told herself, because nothing was the most common answer in a place built on precision, but she tucked the thought away like a pebble in her shoe. Ethan had a reputation for being cold, for cutting through meetings without mercy, but Lily only knew the man who listened without interrupting, the one who seemed to settle when she spoke, the one whose breathing eased after she finished her checks. She adjusted the room temperature to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, dimmed the light one notch, and set a timer for her next round, her movements practiced, almost ceremonial. Somewhere down the hall, laughter flickered and faded, but here the world narrowed to this bed, this routine, this quiet promise she made every night to do things the right way. The hook came without drama, without raised voices or alarms, just a question that tightened her chest as she compared the schedule again and realized the next dose listed didn't align with the pattern she'd been tracking all week. A tiny discrepancy measured in minutes and milliliters, small enough to miss if you weren't looking and impossible to ignore if you were. And as Lily stood there with the card in her hand and the soft glow of the monitor painting the room, she felt the story tilt. Because in a place where seconds mattered and trust was currency, a routine built on care had just uncovered a lie that could change everything. Lily Parker moved through the next hours with the quiet focus that came from necessity, not confidence, because confidence cost time, and she had learned that time was the one thing the ICU never forgave. She logged vitals, refilled water cups she would never drink, and returned to Ethan Caldwell's bedside with the same care she gave every patient. Yet something had shifted inside her, a subtle tension that kept her eyes returning to the chart. Her life outside these walls pressed in at the edges of her thoughts, the rent notice folded into her bag, the voicemail from her mother describing a new prescription and an amount that sounded heavier than it should, and the promise Lily had made to herself years ago that she would never rush the details when details mattered. She checked the clock again, then the chart, then the small pocket card where she wrote everything down in neat, rounded letters. The times were close enough to pass at a glance, but the pattern was wrong, like a song played half a beat off. She remembered her first week on the job, how a senior nurse had told her routines were not habits, but safeguards, and Lily had taken that to heart, building a rhythm she could trust when everything else felt unstable. She warmed another cloth, adjusted the blanket, and spoke to Ethan as if he were awake, telling him about the sunrise she had missed, about the way the city smelled after rain, about how the vending machine finally stocked oatmeal bars again. She noticed, as she often did, that his breathing smoothed when she finished, the monitors settling into a calm cadence that made her shoulders drop. She wrote it down, because she wrote everything down. When Nurse Megan Holt appeared at the doorway with a practiced smile and a clipboard tucked under her arm, Lily felt that tension tighten, not fear exactly, but awareness. Megan had a way of moving that suggested authority without hurry, and she spoke in a tone that implied reassurance, the kind people trusted without question. Lily greeted her politely and stepped aside, watching as Megan reviewed the chart and prepared the next medication. Lily did not interfere, did not accuse, did not do anything dramatic, because she knew her place and she knew the cost of stepping outside it. She watched the hands, the labels, the sequence, and she noticed the vial did not match the color she had seen earlier, a slight difference, translucent instead of faintly amber, easy to miss under fluorescent light. Lily's heart did not race. It slowed, the way it did when she concentrated. She asked a simple question, framed as curiosity, about the timing, about the dosage, about whether the order had changed. Megan answered smoothly, a practiced response that sounded right and felt wrong. Lily nodded, stepped back, and made a note on her card, her pen pressing a little harder than usual. After Megan left, Lily checked the supply cabinet, comparing labels, noting batch numbers, committing small details to memory because memory was a muscle she had trained. She returned to the bedside and adjusted the blinds again, lowering the glare, and spoke to Ethan in a steady voice, telling him she would be back in 15 minutes, that she would keep the room quiet, that she would keep him safe. It was not a promise she had authority to make, but it was one she believed in. As the minutes passed, Lily compared the chart to her notes and felt the pieces align in a way that made her stomach settle with resolve. If she was wrong, she would look foolish and possibly lose her job. If she was right, the cost of silence was unthinkable. She measured the room temperature, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and wrote it down, because patterns told stories if you listened long enough. She stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the city lights blinking like distant signals, and understood that whatever came next would begin with the same thing that had brought her here in the first place. A routine done carefully, patiently, and without applause, because in a place built on trust, the smallest deviations were the loudest warnings. Lily Parker spent the remainder of the night doing what she did best, turning care into careful observation and turning observation into quiet certainty. She completed her rounds with deliberate calm, noting Ethan Caldwell's blood pressure trending steadier after her checks, and marking the exact minutes when the monitor's rhythm softened, as if his body recognized her presence even when his eyes did not open. She reviewed the electronic log terminal at the nurse's station when no one was looking over her shoulder, comparing timestamps to the handwritten chart, and the mismatch repeated itself like a whisper that refused to fade. The orders appeared unchanged, yet the administration times drifted, a few minutes here, a subtle adjustment there, and Lily knew from training that consistency mattered because bodies depended on it. When dawn approached and the windows lightened from charcoal to gray, she walked to the supply room under the pretense of restocking wipes and gloves, scanning the shelves for the same batch numbers she had memorized earlier. She found them, neatly arranged, except for one space that should not have been empty. She did not touch anything. She did not remove anything that would leave a trace, because she understood the rules and the risks, and she understood that the truth lasted longer when it was gathered patiently. Back at the bedside, she spoke to Ethan again, telling him the morning shift would arrive soon, that the city was waking up, that she would be back tonight. She adjusted the pillow and felt, just once, the faintest change beneath her fingers, not a movement anyone would call proof, but enough to make her pause and smile before she wrote it down. Later that morning, after she clocked out, Lily sat on a bench outside the hospital with a paper cup of coffee that tasted thin and burnt, reviewing her notes as traffic moved past in steady streams. Her phone buzzed with another message from her mother, the kind that tried to sound brave while asking for help, and Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting resolve settle in where worry had been. She returned that evening with the same tote, the same quiet determination, and the same respect for a place that asked for humility. The ICU greeted her with its familiar symphony, and Lily greeted it back, stepping into Ethan's room to begin again. Nurse Megan Holt was already there, adjusting equipment with efficient grace, her voice calm as she explained a minor change in schedule that sounded reasonable to anyone who did not track patterns. Lily listened, nodded, and asked a clarifying question about documentation, one that forced a reference to the digital order. Megan answered smoothly, but her eyes flicked, just briefly, to the chart, and Lily felt the click of confirmation settle behind her ribs. She waited until Megan left, then compared the record once more, and the difference revealed itself clearly enough to be undeniable. Lily took a breath and did what aides were taught to do when something did not add up. She escalated through the proper channel, requesting a double check from the charge nurse without naming names or making accusations. The charge nurse arrived, thorough and kind, and together they reviewed the orders, the times, the batches, and the discrepancy that had grown too large to ignore. Protocol unfolded like it was meant to, measured and respectful, because patient safety demanded nothing less. Through it all, Lily stayed at the bedside, maintaining her routine, keeping the room steady, speaking softly so the atmosphere did not change, because fear helped no one. When Ethan's monitor showed a gradual improvement that aligned with corrected timing, the room seemed to exhale, and Lily wrote it down, because evidence mattered. By the end of the shift, an audit had begun, quiet and controlled, and Lily understood that truth did not need drama to be powerful. She washed her hands, adjusted the blinds one last time, and told Ethan she would see him again, believing it more than she had the night before, because in a place built on trust, a routine rooted in care had begun to set things right. Lily Parker returned the following night with a quieter heart and a heavier sense of responsibility, aware that an audit was underway and that careful eyes were now watching the details she had been watching all along. The ICU felt the same and different at once, the steady hum unchanged while the air carried a subtle alertness, like a room after a storm when everyone listens more closely. She greeted Ethan Caldwell as she always did, checking the clock, warming her hands, and beginning the routine that anchored her through long shifts and longer worries. She adjusted the blinds to soften the light, confirmed the room temperature held at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and spoke to him about ordinary things, the kind that made time feel gentle instead of sharp. She told him about a bakery opening near her bus stop, about the morning news she had half heard, about how the rain had finally given the city a break. As she worked, she noticed how his vitals responded with consistent steadiness now that the corrected schedule was in place, a reassuring pattern that validated the quiet decisions made the night before. She wrote everything down, because writing had become her witness. The charge nurse stopped by briefly to confirm a few points, thanked Lily for her diligence, and reminded her to keep doing exactly what she had been doing, which felt like permission and pressure all at once. Lily nodded and returned to the bedside, grounding herself in small, precise motions, aligning the pillow, smoothing the sheet, and counting breaths the way she always did. When Nurse Megan Holt did not appear for the first hour of the shift, Lily noticed the absence without comment, understanding that processes moved deliberately, in places that valued fairness. She continued her rounds, double-checking labels and times, maintaining the rhythm that had become her compass. Later, a hospital administrator arrived quietly with a clipboard and calm questions, asking Lily to describe her routine in her own words, to explain how she tracked patterns, to clarify what had first caught her attention. Lily answered plainly, focusing on facts and sequence rather than feelings, because truth did not need decoration. She explained how she compared charts, how she noted colors and batches, how she believed consistency was a form of care. The administrator listened and thanked her, then moved on, leaving Lily with a familiar blend of relief and unease. At the bedside, Lily noticed a subtle change she had been hoping to see, a slightly stronger response when she spoke, a steadier rhythm that held even when the room shifted around them. She smiled softly and wrote it down, aware that hope could be measured in patterns too. During a quiet moment, Lily caught her reflection in the glass, a tired young woman in scrubs with careful eyes, and she thought of her mother's message waiting on her phone, of the bills that did not pause for good intentions. She reminded herself why she stayed focused, why routines mattered, why speaking up the right way could protect a person who could not speak at all. As the night deepened, Lily performed her checks with renewed confidence, not because she felt important, but because she felt useful, and usefulness had always been her definition of dignity. Near the end of the shift, a doctor paused to review the updated chart and remarked on Ethan's improved stability, a simple observation that landed like a quiet victory. Lily acknowledged it with a nod and returned to her notes, recording the time and the trend, because evidence was the language of change. Before she left, she stood at the bedside a moment longer than usual and spoke to Ethan with steady warmth, telling him she would be back tomorrow, that the room would stay calm, that the routine would hold. As she turned off the lamp and washed her hands, Lily understood that the smallest choices had carried the greatest weight, and that care, when practiced with patience and honesty, could do more than heal. It could restore trust where it had been quietly broken. Lily Parker arrived on the 5th night with the audit now an unspoken presence, a careful order settling into the unit that felt less like scrutiny and more like protection. The routines she had built were no longer just her own. They had become part of the room, part of the way the ICU breathed. She checked in, washed her hands until warmth returned to her fingers, and stepped to Ethan Caldwell's bedside with the familiar sense of purpose that steadied her when everything else felt uncertain. She spoke to him the way she always did, telling him it was Tuesday, that the temperature outside hovered around 58 degrees Fahrenheit, that the city traffic sounded softer tonight, as if people were learning to listen. She adjusted the blinds, confirmed the room held steady at 72 degrees, and began her checks, noting how his blood pressure maintained a consistent range and how the monitor answered with a calm, even rhythm. She wrote everything down, because patterns deserve to be honored. The hospital administrator returned briefly, accompanied by a quiet member of compliance, and asked Lily to walk them through her notes again, this time alongside the electronic record. Lily did not rush. She explained how she tracked times, how she compared colors and batches, how she trusted repetition to reveal what single moments could not. The questions were measured, respectful, and when they finished, the administrator thanked her and told her she had done the right thing. Lily nodded, absorbing the words without letting them swell into pride, because pride distracted and she needed focus. As the evening progressed, Lily noticed a new detail, subtle but meaningful, a slight response in Ethan's hand when she adjusted the sheet, not movement she could claim, but attention that eased when she spoke. She smiled softly and recorded it, aware that hope needed documentation as much as caution did. Nurse Megan Holt did not appear at all that night, and while Lily did not ask why, she understood that accountability often happened quietly, away from patient rooms, to preserve trust where it mattered most. A physician stopped by and reviewed the updated data, remarking on Ethan's steady improvement and the absence of irregular dips that had once punctuated his nights. Lily acknowledged the observation and returned to her routine, because consistency was the point. During a lull, Lily stepped into the hallway to return a call from her mother, listening to concerns about prescriptions and transportation, promising help she was not sure how she would provide, then grounding herself with a breath before returning to the bedside. She told Ethan about the call, about families who worried even when they could not be present, and the monitor continued its calm response, as if agreement were possible even in silence. Later, the charge nurse shared a brief update, explaining that the audit had confirmed documentation irregularities that were now corrected and that additional safeguards were being implemented to prevent future errors. Lily listened and thanked her, feeling a quiet relief settle in her chest. As midnight passed, the room seemed to hold its calm, the lights softened, and Lily's routine unfolded without interruption. She measured, adjusted, spoke, and recorded, each step reinforcing the next. Near the end of the shift, a change occurred that Lily had been preparing for, a slight but undeniable improvement that aligned with every corrected interval she had tracked, a consistency that spoke louder than any accusation ever could. She remained composed, noting the time, the response, and the conditions, because progress deserved the same discipline as caution. Before she left, Lily stood by the bed and spoke to Ethan with the same steady warmth, telling him the room was safe, that the schedule would hold, that care done right made a difference even when no one was watching. She turned off the lamp, washed her hands, and walked out into the early morning air feeling tired but anchored, understanding that a routine built on attention and honesty had not only protected a life, it had begun to restore the quiet trust that allowed healing to continue. Lily Parker noticed the change before anyone said a word about it, because routines taught her how to read what screens could not fully explain. The monitor's rhythm held steady through the early hours, and when she spoke, the cadence softened in a way that felt intentional, as if Ethan Caldwell were learning the sound of her voice again. She followed her steps exactly, washing her hands until warm, confirming the room at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, aligning the pillow, and speaking about ordinary things that grounded time. She told him it was early Wednesday, that the bakery near her bus stop had sold out before dawn, that the city was waking gently. She wrote everything down, including the moment when his fingers flexed faintly beneath the sheet as she adjusted it. Not enough to announce, but enough to record. Midway through the shift, a physician joined her at the bedside and asked her to repeat what she had been noticing, not with suspicion but with curiosity, and Lily answered carefully, explaining patterns, timing, and response. The physician nodded, reviewed the chart, and adjusted the plan to continue the corrected schedule without interruption, thanking Lily for her consistency. The word landed softly, like permission to keep doing what she had been doing all along. Later, Lily was asked to step into a quiet conference room, where a member of compliance and the charge nurse asked a few final clarifying questions. Lily spoke plainly, focusing on sequence and documentation, because clarity was the most respectful form of truth. They confirmed that safeguards were now in place and that her notes would remain part of the official record. When Lily returned to the bedside, she felt lighter, not because the work was over, but because it had been understood. She resumed her routine, speaking to Ethan with steady warmth, telling him that the room would stay calm and that the schedule would hold. As the evening deepened, she noticed something new, a subtle shift when she paused speaking, followed by a steadier rhythm when she continued, as if silence unsettled him and familiarity restored balance. She smiled and wrote it down, aware that connection could be measured by absence as much as presence. Near midnight, a quiet murmur moved through the unit as news spread that documentation irregularities had been resolved and that additional training would follow, not as punishment, but as protection. Lily stayed focused, because change was safest when it happened without spectacle. She checked labels, verified times, and maintained the rhythm that had carried them this far. During a brief lull, Lily checked her phone and saw a message from her mother thanking her for help arranging transportation for the week. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting gratitude replace worry, then returned to the bedside. She told Ethan about it, about families who leaned on small victories, and the monitor responded with its calm assurance. As dawn approached, the physician returned with good news delivered in measured tones, explaining that Ethan was showing signs of emerging responsiveness and that the team would proceed carefully. Lily acknowledged the update and recorded the time, because transitions deserved precision. She adjusted the blinds to let in a soft gray light and continued speaking, keeping the room steady as the world shifted toward morning. When her shift ended, Lily did not linger, but before leaving, she stood at the bedside and spoke one last time, telling Ethan she would be back, that consistency mattered, that care done right had a way of guiding people home. She washed her hands, gathered her tote, and stepped into the cool morning air feeling tired but certain, understanding that routines built on attention had not only protected a patient, they had opened a door, and on the other side of that door, healing was learning how to begin again. Lily Parker sensed the shift before the physician announced it, because the room carried a different weight when a threshold was near. The morning light filtered in softer than usual, and Ethan Caldwell's breathing held a steadier confidence, less borrowed from machines and more claimed by his own body. Lily followed her routine with the same precision she always did, washing her hands, confirming the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, aligning the pillow, and speaking with a calm that kept the space anchored. She told him it was Thursday, that the city was brightening earlier now, that the bakery had finally kept a tray of oatmeal bars aside for the late rush. When she paused, the monitor wavered slightly, then settled when she resumed, and Lily wrote it down, because patterns still mattered even at the edge of change. Mid-morning, the physician returned with a measured smile and explained that Ethan was showing clear signs of emerging awareness, that the team would proceed carefully, that familiar voices could help orient him. Lily nodded and stayed exactly where she was, keeping the cadence steady. She spoke about ordinary things, about buses and schedules and weather hovering around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, about how consistency helped people remember who they were. The first sign came quietly, a subtle tightening beneath her fingers when she adjusted the sheet, followed by a faint flutter of eyelids that did not open but acknowledged effort. Lily did not gasp or call out. She recorded the time and continued, because steadiness was the safest welcome. Later, when the room was quieter, Ethan's eyes opened a fraction, unfocused and searching, and Lily spoke his name once, clearly, without urgency. He blinked again, breathing unevenly for a moment before finding rhythm, and Lily matched her voice to the monitor, guiding calm back into the space. She told him where he was, that he was safe, that people were taking care of the details. Ethan's gaze drifted, then settled, not on machines or charts, but on the sound that had become familiar in the dark. His lips moved without forming words, and Lily reassured him, telling him there was no rush, that listening was enough. The physician entered quietly and observed without interrupting, nodding to Lily to continue. She kept speaking, narrating the present gently, letting recognition grow at its own pace. Ethan's eyes closed again, not in retreat, but in rest, and the room exhaled. The physician confirmed that the response was a good sign and instructed the team to maintain the schedule that had carried them here. Lily acknowledged the guidance and wrote it down, adding a note about voice orientation and response. As the day progressed, Ethan responded again, brief moments of focus punctuating longer stretches of rest, and each time Lily maintained the same tone, the same pace, the same respect. She did not tell him who he was beyond what mattered in the moment, did not burden him with titles or expectations, because identity could wait until strength returned. During a quiet interval, Lily stepped into the hallway to return a call from her mother, listening to gratitude mixed with worry, then returned to the bedside and spoke about families who waited and hoped. Ethan's breathing steadied, and Lily recorded the response, understanding that connection was becoming part of the care plan. Late afternoon brought a small milestone, Ethan's eyes opening more fully, tracking sound, holding focus for a few seconds longer than before. Lily told him her name clearly, once, and he nodded faintly, as if placing it somewhere safe. The physician smiled and confirmed continued progress, reminding everyone to proceed without pressure. Lily stayed composed, returning to her routine as evening approached, because progress was fragile when rushed. Before her shift ended, Lily stood by the bed and spoke with quiet certainty, telling Ethan she would be back, that the schedule would hold, that he was not alone. He did not speak, but his eyes found her again, steady and present, and Lily wrote it down. Because the moment mattered. She washed her hands, gathered her tote, and left the room knowing that the cold distance people once associated with Ethan Caldwell was giving way to something human, guided not by force or spectacle, but by a routine built on patience, honesty, and a voice that had never stopped believing he could hear. Lily Parker entered the unit that evening with a steadier breath and a careful awareness that recovery changed the rules without erasing the need for routine. Ethan Caldwell was no longer only a set of numbers and responses. He was present in brief, meaningful ways that required orientation and patience. Lily washed her hands until warm, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and approached the bed with the same calm she had practiced since the first night. She spoke to him clearly, telling him it was Friday, that the light outside would fade earlier, that the city had cooled to the low 60s. Ethan's eyes opened when she said his name, not wide, not searching, but focused enough to hold the sound. Lily kept her tone steady and explained where he was, that he had been resting, that the team was pleased with his progress. He nodded faintly, a movement small enough to be missed by anyone who did not know what to look for, and Lily wrote it down because recognition still needed proof. The physician arrived and reviewed the plan, emphasizing gentle orientation, limited stimulation, and consistency in voices. Lily acknowledged the guidance and stayed close, speaking only when it helped. Ethan listened, eyes tracking her when she spoke, drifting when she paused, and Lily adjusted, maintaining a cadence that kept him grounded. He attempted to speak once, forming a sound that fell short of words, and Lily reassured him without urgency, telling him that time was on his side. She noticed his gaze linger on her badge and spoke her name again, clearly and slowly, and he nodded, a little stronger this time, as if anchoring it. During a quiet interval, a hospital administrator stopped by to confirm that additional safeguards had been implemented and to thank Lily for her role in identifying inconsistencies. Lily accepted the acknowledgement without embellishment, because attention was better spent at the bedside. When the administrator left, Lily returned to her notes, recording times, responses, and orientation cues, because documentation remained the language of safety. As the night progressed, Ethan became more alert in short windows, responding to simple questions with nods and brief eye contact. Lily guided him gently, asking one question at a time, giving space for rest between efforts. She told him about ordinary markers of time, meals, schedules, and weather hovering around 62 degrees Fahrenheit, because familiarity helped rebuild context. At one point, Ethan frowned slightly, a sign of effort, and Lily adjusted the light and lowered her voice, easing the room back into calm. She noticed his breathing settle when she spoke about routine, about keeping things the same from day to day, and she recorded the effect, understanding that trust was forming in measurable ways. A nurse from the day shift stopped by and shared that the audit findings had been finalized and training updates scheduled, reinforcing the focus on consistency and accountability. Lily listened and nodded, grateful that the resolution prioritized prevention over blame. Back at the bedside, she continued her checks, verifying labels, confirming times, and speaking with the same warmth that had carried them here. Ethan's eyes opened again, and this time he held focus longer, following her voice as she explained that he would continue to rest, that progress did not require speed. He attempted another sound, then stopped, frustration flickering briefly before Lily reassured him, reminding him that effort counted even when words did not arrive. She placed the blanket more comfortably and adjusted the pillow, and his shoulders eased. As the hours passed, Lily noticed a subtle shift, Ethan responding not only to her voice but to the pause between words, a sign that awareness was expanding. She wrote it down, noting the time and condition, because growth deserved tracking. Near the end of the shift, the physician returned and confirmed continued improvement, advising the team to maintain the current plan and familiar voices when possible. Lily acknowledged the guidance and remained composed, because progress thrived in steadiness. Before leaving, she stood by the bed and spoke clearly, telling Ethan she would return the next evening, that the schedule would hold, that he was safe. His eyes found hers, steady and present, and he nodded once, unmistakably. Lily recorded the moment, washed her hands, and stepped into the hallway feeling the quiet weight of responsibility deepen, understanding that healing was no longer only about protection, but about rebuilding trust and memory. One careful routine at a time. Lily Parker returned on Saturday evening aware that the rhythm of the unit had shifted again, not toward crisis, but toward cautious normalcy. Ethan Caldwell was awake more often now, present in short, steady windows that required patience rather than urgency. Lily washed her hands, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and approached the bed with the same quiet confidence she had practiced from the beginning. She greeted him by name and told him the day, the weather hovering around 64 degrees, and what the next few hours would look like. Ethan watched her closely, eyes clearer than before, absorbing the cadence of her voice. She explained each step before she did it, aligning the pillow, checking the monitor, and adjusting the light, because predictability reduced effort. When she paused, he nodded once, as if acknowledging the order of things, and Lily recorded the response, noting improved orientation and sustained focus. A physician arrived to assess progress and asked Ethan simple questions, giving him time to respond. Ethan answered with small movements and brief sounds that formed the beginning of words, and Lily stayed close, grounding the room with calm explanations. The physician confirmed continued improvement and discussed the plan for gradual transition out of the ICU when appropriate, emphasizing that rest and consistency remained priorities. Lily acknowledged the plan and returned to her routine, because transitions were safest when anchored in familiar steps. During a quieter interval, a representative from patient relations stopped by to ensure Ethan's comfort and to confirm that safeguards implemented during the audit were functioning as intended. Lily listened and answered factual questions about timing and response, because transparency protected everyone. As the night progressed, Ethan became more expressive, lifting his hands slightly when Lily spoke and holding her gaze longer between rests. She encouraged him gently, reminding him that effort mattered even without words. She noticed his attention sharpen when she spoke about routine and schedules, and she documented the pattern, understanding that trust was rebuilding itself through repetition. Later, a nurse from another unit mentioned the finalized audit findings and new checks in place, emphasizing shared responsibility and prevention. Lily nodded, grateful that the outcome reinforced care rather than fear. Back at the bedside, she continued to verify labels and times, maintaining the rhythm that had guided them through uncertainty. Ethan attempted to speak again, shaping a syllable that sounded like her name, then stopping as fatigue set in. Lily reassured him, telling him there was no rush and that listening was enough. She adjusted the blanket and lowered the light slightly, and his breathing settled. She wrote it down, noting improved vocal attempt and reduced anxiety with reassurance. As midnight passed, Ethan slept more deeply, resting between moments of alertness, and Lily maintained the room's calm, checking vitals and documenting stability. During a brief break, she stepped into the hallway to check her phone and saw a message from her mother confirming a successful appointment earlier that day. Lily felt relief wash through her, then returned to the bedside and spoke about small victories, about how progress came in measured steps. Ethan stirred and nodded faintly, as if understanding the tone if not the details. Near the end of the shift, the physician returned and reviewed the latest data, confirming readiness to continue the current plan and praising the team's consistency. Lily accepted the guidance and updated her notes, because preparation mattered as much as progress. Before leaving, she stood by the bed and spoke clearly, telling Ethan she would be back the next evening, that the schedule would hold, and that he was doing well. Ethan met her gaze, eyes steady and present, and lifted his hand a fraction, a gesture that required effort and intention. Lily recorded the moment, washed her hands, and stepped out into the cool night air, feeling the quiet weight of responsibility and hope deepen together, understanding that healing was no longer just protection and discovery, but the careful rebuilding of strength, memory, and trust through a routine that never wavered. Lily Parker arrived on Sunday evening knowing that the calm she felt was the result of work still in motion, because accountability did not end when charts aligned and monitors steadied. She washed her hands, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and approached Ethan Caldwell's bed with the same measured steps that had carried them through uncertainty. She greeted him by name and told him the day, the weather hovering around 66 degrees, and what to expect over the next few hours. Ethan met her gaze with recognition that held longer now, his breathing steady as she spoke. She explained each step before she did it, keeping the rhythm predictable, and he nodded faintly, a response that had become familiar and reassuring. As she documented vitals, a member of hospital administration arrived quietly with compliance staff to finalize the audit process, asking Lily to confirm timelines and observations she had already recorded. Lily answered plainly, referencing her notes and the electronic record, because precision mattered more than emphasis. The administrator thanked her and explained that documentation irregularities had been substantiated, corrective measures implemented, and oversight strengthened, ensuring that safeguards would remain in place. Lily listened and nodded, returning her focus to the bedside as the team stepped out, understanding that closure in the system mattered so patients could rest without disruption. Ethan watched her closely, following her voice as she spoke about ordinary markers of time, meals, and rest, and when she paused, he attempted to speak, shaping words slowly, effort visible but controlled. Lily encouraged him gently, telling him to take his time, and he managed a quiet thank you, the words soft but clear enough to register. Lily acknowledged it with a calm smile and recorded the moment, noting improved speech initiation without distress. A physician arrived to assess progress and confirmed readiness for continued recovery steps, emphasizing that consistency remained the priority. Lily acknowledged the guidance and stayed with Ethan, speaking in the same steady cadence that anchored him. As the evening progressed, Ethan became more expressive, lifting his hand to signal understanding and responding to simple questions with brief words and nods. Lily adjusted the environment to support rest, lowering the light and maintaining quiet, and documented each response with care. Later, the physician returned with an update, explaining that the audit had concluded with clear findings and that training updates were underway, reinforcing a culture of accountability and prevention. Lily listened, grateful that the outcomes centered on safety rather than spectacle. Back at the bedside, she continued her routine, verifying labels and times, maintaining the rhythm that had proven its worth. Ethan asked a short question about how long he had been there, and Lily answered honestly and simply, orienting him without overwhelming detail. He absorbed the information, breathing evenly, and nodded, trusting the clarity. As midnight approached, the room settled into a calm that felt earned, the monitor steady, the environment quiet. Lily checked her notes one last time and recorded stability across measures, because completion mattered. Before leaving, she stood by the bed and spoke clearly, telling Ethan she would return the next evening, that the schedule would hold, and that he was doing well. Ethan met her gaze, present and focused, and said her name softly, the word formed with effort and intention. Lily recorded the moment, washed her hands, and stepped into the cool night air feeling the weight of responsibility lift just enough to make room for resolve, understanding that truth, when handled with care and patience, did not disrupt healing but strengthened it, allowing trust to settle back into the quiet places where recovery continued. Lily Parker came in on Monday evening with the sense that the work was changing shape, moving from vigilance to guidance without losing the discipline that had carried them through. She washed her hands, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and approached Ethan Caldwell's bed with the same steady cadence that had become their shared language. She greeted him by name and told him the day, the weather hovering around 68 degrees, and what the evening would bring. Ethan was sitting slightly elevated now, alert in longer stretches, his eyes clear and attentive as she spoke. She explained each step before she did it, aligning the pillow, checking the monitor, and adjusting the light to reduce strain, because predictability still mattered. He listened and nodded, responding with short phrases that arrived carefully, and Lily documented each response, noting sustained orientation and reduced fatigue. A physical therapist stopped by briefly to outline the next phase of recovery, emphasizing gentle progress and consistency, and Lily stayed close, reinforcing instructions in simple terms. Ethan followed along, asking one measured question about timing, and Lily answered honestly, orienting him without pressure. Later, a member of hospital leadership visited to confirm that the corrective measures from the audit had been fully implemented and to thank Lily for her diligence. Lily acknowledged the words and returned her attention to the bedside, because care remained the center. As the evening unfolded, Ethan grew more conversational, asking Lily about her routine and how long she had been working nights. She answered simply, keeping the focus on what helped him feel grounded, and noticed his breathing settle when conversation followed familiar patterns. She recorded the effect, understanding that comfort was part of the plan. At one point, Ethan paused and asked why her voice felt familiar, and Lily explained gently that she had been there during his recovery, speaking to him even when he rested. He absorbed the information quietly, then nodded, gratitude visible without ceremony. Lily adjusted the blanket and lowered the light slightly, maintaining the calm that allowed his strength to build. As midnight approached, the physician returned with an update confirming continued readiness for step down when appropriate, emphasizing that the progress was steady and earned. Lily acknowledged the guidance and updated her notes, because preparation remained essential. During a quiet interval, Lily received a message from her mother thanking her again and sharing relief about the week ahead. Lily let the gratitude settle, then returned to the bedside and spoke about small routines, about how stability made space for healing. Ethan listened, eyes steady, and responded with a clear sentence thanking her for staying consistent. Lily acknowledged the words and documented the moment, noting improved speech endurance. Near the end of the shift, Lily reviewed the schedule with Ethan, explaining what the next day would look like and when she would return. He nodded and repeated the time back to her, a simple exchange that marked progress. Lily smiled softly and wrote it down, because milestones deserved recognition. Before leaving, she stood by the bed and spoke with the same quiet certainty she had offered since the first night, telling Ethan the room would stay calm, that the schedule would hold, and that he was doing well. He met her gaze and said her name clearly, the sound unhurried and present. Lily recorded the moment, washed her hands, and stepped into the hallway with a measured breath, understanding that healing had entered a new phase where strength and trust rebuilt together, guided not by spectacle or force, but by the same attentive routine that had protected him when he could not speak and now supported him as he found his voice again. Lily Parker stepped into the step-down unit on Tuesday evening with a feeling that the room had finally learned how to breathe on its own. She washed her hands, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and approached Ethan Caldwell with the same steady presence that had carried them through every threshold. Ethan was seated in a chair now, posture careful but confident, his eyes clear as he greeted her by name before she spoke. She told him the day and the plan for the evening, and he nodded, following along with ease. Lily explained each step before she did it, checking vitals, adjusting the light, and reviewing the schedule, because predictability still mattered even as strength returned. Ethan listened and smiled faintly, a small expression that held gratitude without display. A physician stopped by briefly to confirm continued readiness for transfer out of critical care and praised the consistency of the recovery plan. Lily acknowledged the update and returned to the bedside, grounding the moment in routine. As the evening settled, Ethan asked Lily if she would sit for a moment, and she agreed, remaining attentive without changing the calm of the room. He spoke slowly, choosing words carefully, thanking her for staying steady when things were uncertain and for speaking to him when he could not answer. Lily listened without interrupting, hands folded, posture relaxed, because listening was part of care. Ethan paused and reached for the hospital wristband that had been removed earlier that day, the thin strip resting on the table beside him. He held it thoughtfully, then looked up at Lily with a focus that carried intention rather than urgency. He said he did not remember much from the days he rested, but he remembered her voice, the cadence that made the room feel safe, and the routine that helped him find his way back. Lily met his gaze, steady and present, letting the words land without surprise. Ethan continued, explaining that the wristband represented the moment his life had depended on consistency and honesty, and that it mattered to him because it marked the beginning of trust. He asked Lily if she would keep it with him as a reminder of how care done right could change everything, offering it not as spectacle, but as a promise grounded in gratitude and respect. Lily accepted the wristband gently, understanding the meaning without needing ceremony, and thanked him for the trust he placed in her. She documented the interaction briefly, because even meaningful moments deserved clarity, then returned the room to calm, adjusting the light and confirming the schedule. As the evening progressed, they spoke quietly about ordinary things, about routines and plans, and the importance of keeping what worked. Ethan rested more comfortably afterward, breathing steady, and Lily recorded stability across measures. Before leaving, she stood by him and spoke with the same quiet certainty she had offered since the first night, telling him the schedule would hold and that the team would continue with care. Ethan nodded and smiled, holding the moment without words. Lily washed her hands, gathered her tote, and stepped into the hallway with a measured breath, understanding that the true payoff of healing was not only recovery, but the commitment to keep choosing honesty, patience, and routine as the foundation for whatever came next, because love and leadership, like care, were proven through actions that remained steady long after the crisis had passed. Lily Parker returned on Wednesday evening for what felt like a closing chapter written without fanfare, because endings earned through consistency rarely announce themselves. She washed her hands, confirmed the room temperature at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and entered the step-down room where Ethan Caldwell stood near the window, posture steady, gaze focused on the city lights beginning to glow. He turned when he heard her voice and greeted her by name with ease, the sound unforced and present. Lily told him the day, the plan for the evening, and the schedule ahead, and he followed along, nodding with understanding that no longer required effort. She completed her checks with the same precision she always had, reviewing vitals, adjusting the light, and confirming times, because routine remained the language they shared. A physician stopped by briefly to confirm discharge planning and ongoing care, praising the stability achieved through steady practice, and Lily acknowledged the guidance before returning her attention to Ethan. As the room settled, Ethan asked Lily to walk with him a few steps, and she stayed close as he moved carefully, confident without haste. He spoke about returning to work gradually, about building systems that reflected what he had learned, and about accountability that protected people rather than punished them. Lily listened, recognizing the alignment between words and action that defined real leadership, had offered since the beginning, telling Ethan the schedule would hold and that the team would continue with care. He nodded and smiled, holding the moment without urgency. Lily washed her hands, gathered her tote, and stepped into the cool night air feeling a settled peace that came from work done right. Weeks later, Lily walked through the hospital lobby in daylight. Her schedule changed, her steps lighter. She passed a framed display honoring a new patient safety initiative focused on routine, transparency, and accountability, and she recognized the values more than the names. Ethan waited near the entrance, dressed simply, posture open, and thanked her again, inviting her to coffee without expectation. They spoke about plans and boundaries, about keeping care central, and about building futures grounded in integrity. Lily agreed, understanding that commitment grew best where respect led. As they stepped outside, the city moved around them, ordinary and alive, and Lily felt certain that the story they shared was not defined by status or crisis, but by actions repeated faithfully. She carried the quiet knowledge that true healing had come from consistency, that justice had arrived without spectacle, and that love, when it appeared, did so as a steady choice, proven each day by the same routines that had once protected a life and now guided two people forward with honesty, patience, and trust.